You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 28th of May 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme...
Exceptional times call for exceptional measures. These were the words of President von der Leyen.
The EU signs off on a new arms fund for the defence of Europe. Monocle's security correspondent gives us the details. We'll have a roundup of business news from Bloomberg's Ewan Potts, and then...
And it's also something which really symbolises community and hospitality. You break bread, you have bread with somebody.
We'll hear how bread has become a symbol of resistance in Ukraine. And we'll get the lowdown on the best brand collaborations and big-name pop-ups springing up in tourist areas around Europe this summer. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. The Security Action for Europe SAFE scheme, an EU-wide joint borrowing defence finance programme, was proposed back in March, prompted by fears of Russian aggression and decreased trust in the United States. It was approved by EU ministers meeting in Brussels yesterday, and now the €150 billion project will go ahead. Well, joining me now is Gorana Grgić, who is Monocle's security correspondent. Gorana, great to have you back on the show. What are the details of SAFE?
So Security Action for Europe, or SAFE, is the EU's first large-scale defence investment programme, which, as you said, has been now approved, has gotten the final okay by the EU Council, and it's worth up to €150 billion, which would be dispersed as long-term loans to member states to support joint procurement of defence equipment, which aims to boost the sorely underfunded and underdeveloped European defense capabilities, and especially in terms of the defense technological industrial base, and of course to reduce by doing that reliance on non-EU suppliers.
Where does the money come from?
So basically, these are funds that will come from the European Union itself. So it's budgeted as an EU loan. Essentially, through pooling of the resources, of course, by all 27 member states, but then those that are actually coordinated at the level of the EU rather than at level of nation states.
And how do projects qualify for SAFE funding?
So this is a really important thing to note. So the idea is that what EU wants to do now is to get countries to work together. So the idea of joint procurement is a really important one to emphasize here. So basically, what countries will need to do is first to submit national defense investment plans, and to do so in cooperation with at least one other country, and then basically to apply for this type of joint procurement loan. At the moment, there is a provision, as we've seen from the latest communication from the EU, that there are some single country applications which will be considered and temporarily allowed, because, of course, the urgency is great. We can't underemphasize this part, but certainly moving forward, countries will need to work together. EU countries will need to work together, at least two of them, to be able to qualify. And then there is another part of this whole sort of equation, which is that there are third countries that can also join the projects, so non-EU member states. So basically, these countries, which again are termed as third countries, include Ukraine and a couple of other countries from within the European Economic Area, so countries like Norway, Liechtenstein, Iceland, as well as countries that have signed these new defense and security partnerships with the EU. So
what like Britain, for instance.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right there. So this was a major news last week, actually, coming out of that summit that the EU and UK had and signing the security and defence agreement.
So what exactly will this money be spent on?
There are two categories of defense needs. So category one includes everything from ammunition to ground system to sort of infrastructure protection, cyber, military mobility. So these types of projects. Whereas category two is one that deals with more advanced technologies, such as air defense, various naval systems, drones, even space assets. So kind of all across the various domains. And the second category, the more advanced category, will have stricter eligibility rules when it comes to partnering with other countries, but also in terms of requiring really European input over both design and evolution of some of these projects.
Now, we know this has come about partly in response to Russia's increased aggression. How has Moscow responded?
Well, certainly these have been evolving conversations now for quite some time. I would say even from, if you take a look at where the European Union has been in 2022 at the outset of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine to these days, and of course various other developments then happening in between. And I think this just comes now as yet another sort of manifestation of various aspirations that the EU has in terms of shoring up its defense industrial and technological base. So what Russia is doing in response is basically doing pretty much the same thing, right? It has shifted its economy into a full war economy. And I think that this is where the urgency comes from the European side, because if you take a look at what Russia has been doing, kind of repurposing its economy to suit military needs in order to deter that potential aggression and in order to be able to provide for Ukrainian defense, Europe needs to get more serious.
And it looks like it finally has. I mean, what will this mean for European defense? Is this the shot in the arm it needed?
It's definitely one of the shots that are sorely needed, I think, especially in terms of the kind of questions of and issues of fragmentations when it came to procurement, for instance, and inability to send strong signals to defense industries on the continent. So in that sense, it's definitely a positive step forward. But we also have to say that SAFE is only one pillar of the broader Rearm Europe, this whole Readiness 2030 plan that you already mentioned, which aims to mobilize over 800 billion euros in defense funding through not just EU, but also national and private sources. So in that sense, these are just, again, kind of parts of a broader sort of discussion and, again, plans that will hopefully, again, be implemented if Europe is to really see through what it has promised in basically enhancing its strategic autonomy and complementing some of the NATO efforts and becoming more capable on defense front.
Thank you, Gorana. That was Gorana Grgić, who is Monocle's security correspondent. Now, here's Monica Lillis with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. French President Emmanuel Macron has met with his Indonesian counterpart, President Prabowo, in Jakarta. French companies like mining giant Aramay and defence provider Dassault Aviation are hoping to capitalise on these diplomatic ties, with Macron announcing new orders for fighter jets. Australia's Liberals and the Nationals have settled their dispute and reformed the coalition after a week-long dramatic split. The Nationals had split from the Liberals for the first time in 38 years, only to return to the negotiating table within 48 hours after crisis talks between the two leaders. Japan has lost its status as the world's top creditor for the first time in 34 years. The yen's depreciation boosted the value of Japan's foreign currency assets, including stocks, bonds and other holdings, when converted into the local currency. Japan has been overtaken by Germany, which benefited from the large current account surplus. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Monica. Now, Ewan Potts is Bloomberg business reporter. He joins us now for a roundup of the latest news. Ewan, we've just been talking about Japan. Continuing on that country, the mammoth government debt levels there are causing concern for investors. What's been happening in the markets?
Hello, Julia. Yeah, government debt levels are ballooning around the world. The US is currently running a budget deficit of more than 6% of GDP. They're adding $2 trillion a year to a debt pile which already exceeds $36 trillion. That's 36 million. But this week, investors are focused on Japan, long a nation with a hefty stock of government debt. An auction of 40-year government bonds has just seen the weakest demand since last summer. And the yields on 40-year and 30-year bonds have recently touched the highest on record. Remember that when bond prices go down, the yield goes up, making it more expensive for governments to borrow. The worry, I think, in Japan, as elsewhere, is that rising government spending is going to take budget deficits into dangerous territory. And Japan's economy is already facing something which consumers are just not used to, and that is rising prices. The latest survey of economists of households' inflation expectations put these at the highest level on record. Households in Japan currently expect average annual inflation of nearly 10% over the next 5 years, although it should be pointed out that actual inflation is currently running at about 3.5% in Japan. But the worry is that those expectations of rising prices kind of become baked in, making people demand higher wages and pushing companies in turn to raise prices further. And that turns into a vicious cycle. And of course, if you're a bond investor with a fixed return, well, the thing you fear most is inflation eroding those returns.
And Ewan, let's switch focus a little bit. You've been looking at an opinion piece about the use of AI in education.
Yeah, really interesting this. What will education look like in a few years' time, given the rapid march of artificial intelligence? This is the subject of a Bloomberg editorial opinion piece mulling this particular topic. Several recent reports have shown outsourcing one's homework to AI has become routine. And perversely, students who still put in the hard work often end up looking worse than those who haven't cheated. And although there are tools to detect AI, the truth is they're not very accurate, with false positives as well as misses. And what's weirder is there's now evidence of some teachers using AI to mark essays, raising the possibility of computers marking work written by computers. It's all a little perplexing and, frankly, quite depressing. The piece does go on to propose a few solutions, not least more in-class assessment using good old-fashioned pen and paper if the students are still understand how to use those things. But if you can't be bothered to read the whole article, don't worry. There is a short summary for you, written, of course, by AI.
Ewan, thank you very much indeed. That's Ewan Potts there. And you're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, bread holds a very important place in Ukrainians' memories and minds. In addition to being a staple on everyday tables, it's taken on a symbolic significance ever since Moscow's invasion. In particular, the sourdough palianitskaya, the pronunciation of which is a telltale signifier of whether the speaker is from Ukraine or Russia. British journalist Felicity Spector examines this in her book Bread and War. She tells Monocle's Julia Lassica more.
I mean, bread is really important on the Ukrainian table. If you look back at Ukrainian history and tradition, there's a lot of Ukrainian breads that are very much linked to different festivals like Christmas and Easter and so on. There's always a special bread. And palianitsa, which is the iconic Ukrainian sourdough, even the word itself became really symbolic. During the start of the full-scale invasion, when Russian soldiers were literally sort of miles from Kyiv, there were loads of roadblocks around, and sometimes when people stopped someone who looked suspicious, they would ask them to say the word palianitsa, because apparently Russians can't pronounce it. So this was a very iconic word in itself for the Ukrainians. And it's also something which really symbolises community and hospitality. You break bread, you have bread with somebody. One of our baker friends who travels with us a lot, who help at the mobile bakery, said that the word companion comes from the Latin compane, which means with bread.
And one question I really wanted to introduce our listeners into types of bread or types of dishes that you've been exposed to in your work in Ukraine at the mobile bakeries, but also going to people's homes, being invited in. Just sort of what are the highlights that our listeners can hear about?
I mean, so we have a mobile bakery which the charity Bake for Ukraine bought. We did the fundraising here, and it's still working away in Mykolaiv. And they make this palyanitsa bread on board, and also a really delicious rye bread, because the quality of Ukrainian wheat and rye and barley and all the other grains is really, really high. Very nutritious. It's all locally grown. We try to get our wheat from a local organic wheat grower in the Odessa region. But everybody there is so hospitable. It's absolutely amazing. If you go to someone's house for a cup of tea, then suddenly they lay the entire table with food. Ukrainians like to eat a kind of pork fat called salo. I'm Jewish, obviously I don't eat that. But they then, oh my gosh, there'll be nothing for you to eat. There's a table full of food. I mean, they have pickles, they have different cheeses like brinza. They make these delicious little pancakes, which is my favourite food, called sirniki. It's made of curd cheese, sometimes with raisins, which I always like, and it's served usually with some jam or fruit compote. You can get it on breakfast menus everywhere. People always have jars of fermented foods that they keep, especially if they have a small allotment. A lot of people who live in the country will have a big garden behind where they live, and they'll make pickled cabbage, pickled cucumbers, tomatoes, apple, plums. I mean, it's amazing, absolutely delicious.
Yeah, and well, there's so many things to unpack there. But one of the things that I think people have been sort of waking up to is actually what we in Western Europe can learn from Ukrainians. So at the end of the book, you talk about if there was a sort of shutdown in shops here, etc., we'd sort of run out of food pretty quickly. Whereas in Ukraine, there's this resilience because there's this abundance of food always being sold. But also, I mean, just in the cuisine and the techniques that we're using and the ingredients that are being mixed together, what are the sort of big lessons that maybe you have brought back, or that maybe you encourage chefs even to go to Ukraine to learn about Ukrainian attitudes to food and cooking?
I mean, there's a very, very zero waste culture, and that's partly because of the Holodomor, the famine in the 1930s that was induced by Stalin. So many people starved to death, and so there's a huge sort of cultural heritage, I suppose, of saving food and treating it as a precious resource. So you give someone some bread, they're not going to throw it away, they're going to use it, and they're going to keep it. And so that's why we make sourdough, because it keeps really well. And also, yes, I was talking to Yevhen Klopotenko, who's a well-known chef in Kyiv, and he said, imagine if all the shops in England closed down for weeks and there was nothing on sale, people would go absolutely crazy. Whereas in Ukraine, because under the Soviet system, nobody trusted the authorities to deliver anything, they were used to having their own resources, and people are very resourceful. I met this guy who was living in a basement under shelling for months in Izium in Kharkiv region. He could make candles out of potatoes. And they just managed to make bread out of some flour and a bit of water and whatever they could find. And people were heating up food over candles and things when there was no power. And they just kind of make the best of what they've got. And these techniques of fermentation and pickling, it means that you can preserve the fruit that you get in summer for, months till the next, to the next year. So when you're living through winter and so on and there aren't fresh vegetables, you've got all that. It's very, very good for you. Keeps for ages. They make beautiful juices out of the liquid. There's a drink called uzvar, which is made from the liquid left over from cooking dried fruit. There's a lot of dried prunes and apricots and things that you can get. They're always slightly savoury. They're almost smoked. So this drink isn't too sweet, and it's very nutritious because it's got all that vitamins that you get from left over from cooking the fruit. So things like that, it's zero waste, but it's nothing that they only just picked up from some trend. It's stuff which their grandmothers learned and have passed on.
Yeah. And finally, the book ends with recipes, which is almost a surprise because it sort of reads a sort of memoir, and there's history in there, and there's politics and culture and everything. It's a great read. But then you end with these recipes. I wanted to ask what you were thinking of when you gave that to your readers. What did you want them to take away from that book? And did it sort of bring it to life more, do you think, for the readers as well?
I love Ukrainian food. I really enjoy it. It's one of the, I can't wait to get back there. And even in really difficult places like Kherson, a lady rushed up to us and gave us a jar of pickles to take away. And, I couldn't believe it. She hardly had anything and the place is a nightmare to live in. And then these Sirniki, I really feel like an ambassador for them. I want people to make them and enjoy them and sort of realise that it's like having cheesecake for breakfast, what's not to love. And I think by making the food, it's like a gateway into the culture and it's something which you can then share with other people. There are fantastic cooks like Olia Hercules, she's really done more than anyone else to popularise Ukrainian food and recipes. And I think that spreading that knowledge and helping people to understand, the flavours and some of the techniques and stuff that they use. There's nothing complicated. It's always things you can make, in your kitchen with one bowl or something. It's simple, but it's got complex flavours. And I really hope that people will then want to learn more about Ukrainian culture and other traditions.
That's Felicity Spector talking to Monocle's Julia Lassica. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, one reliable indicator of summer in Europe, regardless of the weather, is the brand pop-up. Well-known names are setting up seasonal shops in top tourist spots to make the most of the retail opportunities this season. Well, joining me now is Natalie Teodosi, who's Monocle's fashion director. And in fact, you've just had a promotion, haven't you?
I did, yeah. I just started working on Confect as well, which is great. I've always loved working with Sophie, so we're just making it a little bit more official now. So thank you.
Excellent. Natalie, why do brands do the seasonal pop-up business?
It's interesting because I've been asking this question to a lot of designers the last week as I prepared to send our July-August issue to print. And there's different kind of approaches and motivations behind it. I think there's strictly commercial motivations. I think summer wear, resort wear for travelers, that people are realizing that people are traveling more and more. They want to spend when they're traveling and they want exclusive product to that destination. So you'll see a lot of the big brands do seasonal boutiques. Now it's become kind of part of their routine and their regular marketing budgets, which wasn't the case in the past. But for others, it's also a bit of an opportunity to get more creative and to indulge in things that they love. Like the New York-based designer Ulla Johnson is doing a 2-week pop-up in Comporta in Portugal, for example. And she did do some towels and bathrobes for the spa. But she's also making a cocktail and a health tonic because she's really into wellness, she's really into travel. So it's also an opportunity to experiment with a new medium. Others are doing sun loungers, umbrellas. So you can get out of your routine of designing ready-to-wear, do something a little bit more indulgent and relaxed and work with people that you don't usually work with.
And I guess that association with another big name, even if it's just a location, is good.
Absolutely, yes. I think, again, I was recently speaking to Andreas Palm. He's Swedish and he owns the brand CDLP. They specialize in men's and women's underwear and loungewear. But he's working with Hotel Pasalacqua, which is one of the most beautiful hotels in the world in Lake Como. So that association immediately puts your brand on a whole different level.
Mm-hmm. So tell us more about Pasalacqua.
Yeah, so Pasalacqua actually just opened a few years ago, and soon after it was named best hotel in the world. I think in 2023 it was the family home of Valentina De Santis, who is now CEO, and they also own Grand Hotel Tremezzo, also in Lake Como, and they have started doing just investing more in fashion. They've launched a Sense of Lake, which is an e-commerce platform that highlights mostly Italian heritage brands, so the best that Italy has to offer. But once every summer, at least, they also bring on board a fashion brand and they do an exclusive capsule. What Valentina was telling me is that it's not a strategic move. It's not something that they want to get huge revenue from. It's something that is supposed to surprise surprise guests, and it needs to have a meaning and a bit of a personal story. So in this case with CDLP, she went to school in Minneapolis with Andreas Palm 20 years ago. Apparently they both had a terrible time. It was freezing cold. They didn't want to be there. But they became friends and over the years followed each other's journey. So when CDLP was formed, they started with a swimwear capsule at Grand Hotel Tremezzo, and this summer they're going even bigger with this. It's with this capsule that will cover resort wear, swim, and it's this idea of if someone loses their luggage, they can go into the hotel shop and CDLP has them covered with this. It's very joyful capsules. Usually CDLP is very Swedish and a little bit more toned down. But with this capsule, apparently, and working with Valentina, they felt this will to experiment a bit more, and they've done prints inspired by vintage postcards. So yeah, it's really fun, and they will be having a beautiful lunch this week to celebrate with a boat ride and friends of the brand kind of all coming together in Lake Como.
Oh, it sounds wonderful, and of course, if you're there, you can also experience their new Seed to Skin spa, which sounds amazing. It's all joined up by underground corridors and things.
Yeah, they really get creative with their projects, and she was saying that we don't want to do what guests expect us to do or what's trendy in hospitality. It's our home, so we're going to do what we love, whether it's fashion or the amazing spa that you're speaking about. Yeah. And we just hope that to surprise people and that they will love our vision.
Take us now to Monte Carlo.
So Monte Carlo, Simon Port Jacquemus, French designer, born a little bit outside the city in Marseille, has taken over the Monte Carlo Beach Club. And added his very joyful, he calls it banana yellow signature color, and then stripes on the beautiful sun loungers and the umbrellas, giving his very Mediterranean Marseillaise vibe to the beach club. And he's actually also done it in Ibiza, in Casa Yondal, which is another very popular destination. And again, it seems like it's a trend going on, but he has also been all about the Mediterranean, all about summer. His collections really thrive in summer. He's known for raffia bags and hats and linens. So it's a kind of meeting that makes sense, and I'm sure people will love going to the beach club and taking pictures on those sun loungers and then enjoying it. It enhances the atmosphere and the overall experience.
And I understand his whole sort of aesthetic is about creating on-site boutiques that feel like his home rather than traditional retail spaces.
Exactly. Boutiques. And also what he's even more famous for is his fashion shows. He's taken people everywhere, including like the lavender fields in Provence, and creates these experiences that are really special. Even when he was very young, without a big budget, he would somehow be able to create this very homey, amazing experience. And I guess now this is just an extension for the summer, and he's kind of applying it to the beach club so that more people can enjoy it.
And finally, to Athens.
To Athens, which is close to home for me. Lake Vouliagmeni in the Athens Riviera is a beautiful spot. It's beach club, restaurant, boutique. It's recently been rebranded by Ethan Mytilineos, who's the new creative director. And he brought on Zeus and Dion, which is Athens, we call it like a flagship fashion luxury label, one of the few that have really expanded and gained international reputation. So they work together. Again, they design sun loungers, the umbrellas. I think uniforms are coming, and there's also Zeus and Dion collections at the boutique. And the whole inspiration was Byzantine art. And they actually worked with a wood engraver who created the pattern that was then printed on the sun loungers and the umbrella. So again, it's what we were speaking about before: a lot of storytelling and a bit more meaning into the collaboration rather than just slapping a logo. And I think as more and more brands get into this hospitality game, these are the kind of collaborations that will stand out.
And in terms of the lake itself, I understand it's an area of outstanding natural beauty.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually being conserved, and they've really tried to reserve it and draw inspiration. Mario Schwab, the creative director of Zeus and Dion, was saying that the moment that he visited, the whole idea about the project kind of came to him, and they keep coming back for inspiration. And it's relatively close to the center of Athens, so it's somewhere you can go and disconnect for the weekend.
Excellent. Well, that's your summer retail sorted. Natalie, thank you very much indeed. That's Natalie Teodosi, Monocle's fashion director. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Francesca Gilks, and our studio manager was Flynn Simons. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.